Okay, so my name's Simon Acton. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the current chair of EVoA for my sins. We've got a number of the other committee members on the call today as well. Just to run through a quick agenda, I'm going to start off by just giving a very quick update from the committee side of things. So quite often we don't have time to share the work that we're doing in the background to sort of further the cause of EV adoption, but I'm just going to give a quick update so you can get an idea of the sort of things we're engaged in at the moment. Then we're going to have a presentation from Eamon Stack from Range Therapy. I won't steal Eamon's thunder, he can explain to you, but basically he's starting up a new business at the moment to put extension battery packs into EVs. So I think that's very relevant to owners at the moment and anyone thinking of buying one going forward. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion, which is basically around trying to share a bit of information to the community about buying used EVs and any issues that you might have around that. So I reached out to all of the independent EV dealers in Ireland that I'm aware of anyway. So obviously I'm one of them myself, but we've also got Phil Fitzgerald and I can never get the name right. Is it Maciej of EVelectric Autos in Navan as well. So we're going to have a good chat about, give some advice hopefully. Then we got a presentation from Elena Wrelton, who runs a company called ELVES, and they're basically, part of what they're doing is all around recycling, and they're getting into looking at what's happening in the space of EVs and hybrids, so how batteries and so on can be recycled, which I think is, it's good information to have, maybe when you're thinking about what to do if you need to swap out a battery down the line, or whether you might even be scrapping a car at some stage, just to know the options there. Then we're going to have an open Q&A, which doesn't have to be questions about used EVs. It can be questions about anything that you've got in this space. So I'm just going to give a very quick update from the EVoA committee. So just to give you a flavour of what we've been doing. So those of you that were at the AGM back in June, from that point on, we've basically started meeting monthly now. We were previously meeting only quarterly. This has just given us a bit more drive and engagement in the group to really sort of move things forward, and I think it's been a good benefit in that time. We've continued our engagement with ESB cars and ESB networks. We generally meet with them 2 or 3 times a year to discuss their plans and any relevant matters. So we met last with them in September, which was really on the back of them introducing the pay charging around the AC network, and just feeding back to them the feelings from the community and the survey that we put out in advance of that. So we're still pretty well engaged with them and continue to do so. And so we got an update on what they're doing with the infrastructure rollout. I want to be keeping an eye on for 2021 is we should be seeing the first multi-charging hub in Monstreven on the M7, and that should be starting construction anytime now, and hopefully will be open in 2021. Obviously, in parallel with that, they have also been working on continuing to roll out additional rapid chargers, replacing some of the standard chargers with some of these new units as well. And I think there was news only yesterday of three new units going in on the West Coast, which is great news for anyone out that side who've been, pretty disadvantaged up until now. So that's good news, I think. Also engaged with ESB networks around their what's called Price Review 5. So some of you may know that ESB, their budget in terms of what they have available to spend is ultimately determined by the CRU. So they have a 5-year schedule for agreeing that. So the latest one is for the period 2021-2025. So I was engaged with them around their submission to the CRU to make sure that they get the funding they need in place to, make sure that we enable electrification of transport by making sure anyone could get a home charger installed, i.e. the network is up to it in their neighbourhood, so that won't be a problem. And also that smart meters and things like this are going to be proactively rolled out as well. So this is all part of the bigger picture, and quite often it's tempting to blame a lot of our woes on ESB, but it's not always ultimately their, in their gift. So just trying to work around that whole ecosystem and make sure that they're getting what they need and supporting them. They've also asked us to put out a survey around icing. So I know probably all of you have had trouble with ICE cars in charging bays and so on. They want us to gather some information, so there'll be a survey coming out on that soon. So as much engagement we could get as possible would be great, and feed that back to ESB cars. And there's also, I made a post on this on the Facebook forum earlier, yesterday I think. ESB Networks have published a strategy document around their plans for electrification of heat and transport, and we will make a submission for that by the 20th of November. But anybody can do that. The more voices and more information they get in, the better. So I'd urge anyone to have a look at that and put a submission in if you want to have your voice heard. Moving from ESB, so other things we've done. So I think all of you probably agree having Eamon Ryan in place is probably is a positive thing for us and our movement. We wrote to him just to suggest a deputation meeting at some point with the committee so that we can get our point of view across. We have previously had engagement with the department, the DCCAE, or whatever they're called this week. We don't have a contact there currently. We're chasing that up because we want to keep that engagement going, and they were very interested in our point of view. So looking to move on with that. We're trying to lobby councils as much as possible around them using their on-street charging grant, which is available through SEAI, so that we get more chargers out on the streets. Anyone that can help us in that cause, if you can approach your local council or councillor or representative, that all helps in getting that moving along. We've also very recently, thanks to Jan Bart, had a great engagement with SEAI, and we're hoping to meet with them quarterly moving forward. EV Summit, yeah, so we attended a few of us attended the EV Summit. It was a virtual event this year. I was on a panel discussion there where we talked a lot about charging infrastructure, and that, albeit it is an industry event, but it's good that we're included and that we get our voice out there and people know who we are. So that was a positive and very useful event again this year. Other things we're working on. So we're working in the background on refreshing our branding and our website. We've a bit of work to do there still. I'm hoping we'll have something out either before the year's out or very early in the new year, but that's ticking along in the background. We're also looking at developing more incentives for paid members and looking at corporate memberships as well going forward, and that will be something that we'll bring to the next AGM. We'll continue rolling out information on our website and social media platforms, so you've probably seen quite a lot of car reviews, and we've got some more coming, and we've the usual sort of publication of sales figures and so on. Quarterly newsletter we started publishing as well, which hopefully all of you have seen, and we continue to engage with the media. Now, obviously, we're having this virtual event in lieu of being able to do anything physical. Hopefully, COVID pending, next year we'll be able to move back to starting to do physical events again. In the meantime, we're hoping to do a few of these over the winter period if there's an appetite from the community to do so. So please feed back to us after today. If you'd like to see more of the same, something a bit different, let us know. We're here for all of you. And yeah, just to say, if you're joining this and you're not already an EVoA member, then please do think about becoming a member. You can go to irishevowners.ie and all the information you need there. Okay. enough from me for the time being. So I'm going to pass over now to Eamon Stack, who's going to talk to us about range therapy.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here talking to you today. I haven't been a member of the association for a long time, and lots of people have done so much work over the years, but I have been driving EVs for 14 years and been baffled why it hasn't taken off, you know, and I'm sure I share your frustration with that. Why is it so slow to transition when it's such a serious issue? And then for the last 8 years, myself and my colleague have been upgrading Vectrix maxi scooters, upgrading their battery packs and their BMSs on a voluntary basis. And now we've decided to take an initiative in the car space. So range therapy is our initiative, and we're a social enterprise. So this presentation, I'll talk about the context of what we're doing. Then I'll focus on the problem, why range is an issue, our particular contribution solution to this, and then towards the end, if I have time, talk about who we are and what it is to be a social enterprise. And then, I mean, questions can be gathered in the question section. And I'll ask Kevin and Guillaume to intervene if anything isn't clear in terms of the audio or the video. Thanks indeed. Okay, so the first part is the context is climate change and global crisis. And it seems that there's three main human causes: transport, electricity generation, and industry and agriculture particularly in Ireland. And it looks like there's kind of a 33-33 divide between the three. It's not perfect, but that's where it's at. So range therapy, we're focused on the transport issue, and you know, how do we transition to a form of transport that benefits the climate or benefits the environment and doesn't destroy it, and like that's possible. So that's our purpose, and it's our contribution to climate change. We're all aware of Norway, where Norway is at. The August, maybe even September stats are incredible. 85% of all new cars have plugs. 65% of them are pure EVs. However, only 20% of cars in Norway are EVs. So there's still a long way to go to change the driving stock. So it does remind us that the transition isn't just new cars, that actually 80% of car sales are used cars. So that's what makes today really interesting. So, well, how do we deal with the car stock? And what are the possibilities of changing over? And then range therapy within this context, what's range therapy is trying to respond to the climate change to reduce the carbon footprint of transport, okay? And we're doing that by extending the range of EVs that need their range extended. And that has two important impacts. It makes the cars more useful, but it also extends the longevity of those cars. So, you know, I have a Nissan Leaf myself, a 2012. It only went 100 kilometers on a good day. That wasn't useful, and my wife wouldn't use it going long distances. So now it's transformed, but also it means I'm going to keep that car for 10 years, and that reduces the carbon footprint of the car because the carbon footprint is spread over many more years. And then we hope this initiative will also help to generate a really important discussion about range, because range is a block to EV adoption. Okay, so then in this context, okay, with the community, I'd like to present range extension as an EV strategy, as one component of our wider strategy to move to transition. So, you know, range is a significant block to EV adoptions at the table, Christmas, and anytime family are gathered together. It always comes up as an issue. So that, you know, EVs with poor range, which are the early adopter EVs, actually give us bad press, and they're actually not great cars. But partly by having a range extension initiative, it says, well, we can fix this problem. This is not insurmountable. It's actually a relatively easy technical problem. So, you know, by offering a range extension solution, that changes the narrative around range. And then what's important in that narrative is, you know, that EV range of EVs is different to ICE. And so there's a whole change in society's understanding around range that we need to engage with and say, look, you start your car every day and it's full. That's different to an ICE car. And the other thing is about longevity and carbon footprint of the construction of any car. And so that from our perspective, the 10-year scrappage concept is an absolute disaster. That, you know, that means you're getting rid of perfectly usable cars and dumping them. And what's more is, well, ICE cars may be dying after 10 years, but EVs will go on for 25 years. So we think this is really important, that it's those two issues that we keep in balance. And yeah, okay, so what are the solutions that we're offering? So the biggie is an 18 kilowatt extension. So for a Leaf, that's doubling its range easily, okay? And you know, it's 120 extra kilometers. And also, particularly in terms of the Leaf, but it applies to other cars as well, that by adding newer battery packs with different chemistry and sharing the load of the acceleration and the charge, the main pack will be protected. So it serves two important purposes for the longevity of the car. And the current cost, we're trying to negotiate a price that's acceptable to people. We'll talk about being a social enterprise. That's part of it. We're not a commercial entity, and you know, we're only here to serve a particular need within the community. So we think it'll be about 6,750, maybe up as far as 7,500, which I really hope we don't have to do. But we're negotiating on that. Or a smaller extension pack is possible then for 9 kilowatt, which will give you an extra 60 kilometers on your car. So it's all about what you need as a driver, and then deciding, you know, part of the therapy thing is let's talk about range first before you purchase. And then, but if you need a longer range, we have a fix. Then the other possibility with cars is just to swap out their battery pack. And in the case of the Leafs, if you can swap out a 24 with a 40, well, that's your problem solved. And if you could get a 60 kilowatt pack if you need it, well, that's that solved. The only thing to note is that there is a fundamental flaw with that generation of batteries, which are in Renaults and Nissans. And so, you know, swapping the pack doesn't deal with the degradation issue in a systematic way that the extension pack does. And so we're thinking the cost about this of a battery swap is, if you can find the pack, we can do it for 1,200 for the 40 or 2,200 for the 60. And then what's really interesting is this is only the beginning. Okay, so there's a lot of other cars out there that in terms of this used car market, if people purchase cars and then realize they need an extension. So with our partners in the Netherlands who developed the kit, and that's Muxan.com, the IMEV, the Outlander is really interesting because it's a great car. And the Kangoo, the Peugeots, the Partner, and Citroens. You know, so we're working through a range of car, and potentially we could work with all plug-in hybrids and increase their electric range very significantly. So reduce the ICE part of them. And then, given that there's a huge stock of other hybrids, it'd be great if we could work with them. But the non-plug-in hybrids don't have adequate chargers, so it creates a big problem to be able to convert them. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Without audience feedback, it's hard to know whether it's making any sense. But the whole proposition here is the community did need a solution in this area. The brilliant guys in Muxan have built the solution, and then we're bringing it to Ireland and installing it. So what's great about the solution, okay, and what we like as engineers is it's a light touch and it's completely reversible. Okay, so what the change involves is putting the new battery in the boot of the car in a fireproof box and screwed to the car, and then the HV cable just taps into the high voltage cable just before the plug where the cable goes into the battery. So you just tap the high V cable and then you insulate it with a resin, and then you also tap into the CAN bus within the car to tell it that it's got an extended range. So the Leaf just thinks it's got a 40 kilowatt pack, and everything's the same. Charging is the same, and all the graphics work equally well. So therefore, it's very easy to unplug the CAN bridge, the little computer that's connected into the CAN circuit, and then it's maybe 3 hours work to take the battery pack out. And if you take the kit out of one car, then that's available for another car. And I remember I was interviewed on Radio Kerry last week, and they were saying, well, can anybody do this in their garage? And I was saying, no, that's not possible. This is not a DIY job here. This is a process that has been developed by Muxan that is fully compliant with the international standard, which is the UN ECE 100 standard for batteries in EVs. So it's not a DIY job. You have to be really careful here that the particular solution completely protects the car. So here we are we're over with Muxan in the Netherlands. It's near the Hook of Holland, near The Hague, and myself on the left and Barry McMahon on the right. The pack on front of it is a Generation 1 pack. It's 32 centimeters tall, and then the two in the pack are Generation 2 packs for Leaf Generation 2, which are only 18 centimeters tall, so they fit nicely in the boot. Here's the pack going into the car down in Kildare, into Barry's car. And then here is the Generation 2 Leaf with the pack in the boot. And you know what's significant here is there's plenty of boot left. My car, there's not a lot of boot left, and my dog is pretty pissed with me over it. But hey, other than that, it works. And then there's also other solutions that Muxan have developed that might be of interest to people. Less so in Ireland, the 3-phase charger, but it's a 20 kilowatt charger. But what might be interesting is going forward is they have a CCS DC charger that works at 175 kilowatts. So that's a game changer, especially with the new chargers going in. With a little caution here, this ain't cheap. They're not cheap. And then the third is a tow hitch. It's not for pulling heavy loads. It's carrying your bikes or carrying a box in the back of the car. So can I just ask Kevin, are we okay for time? Are we doing, Kevin?
Sorry, I think you're okay for time. Okay. Yeah, keep going. Okay,
thanks indeed. So just engaging in this world, it's been relatively new in the community and so on. And three things that stand out for me. And one is that the EV community has particular needs and needs to find solutions to those things. And they can find them in different places. But it's about having the possibility of meeting needs. And in the case of these cars with poor range, it's been screaming out at me because I had one of the cars for years, but there was no solution in Ireland. But what really shocked me is there was no solution in the UK, and the Leafs were made in the UK and much bigger island than us. So that surprised me. So talking to Simon, there's about 6,000 Leafs in Ireland with this problem, and there might be 6,000 other cars that we could work on to give range extension insofar as it's needed. But one of the questions is, are there other needs that are not being met, and that we might kind of work together and say, look, we need to do an R&D project on this particular problem so that we solve it. The second issue is it seems very expensive, and I had to save up money to convert my own car. So relative to the cost of the car, relative to a big job on a big engine job on a nice car, this is expensive. 7,000 euros, a lot of money. However, you have to have the discussion and say, the value, adding a battery pack that's a high quality lithium-ion battery isn't throwing away money here. This is investing in something that will last for many years. Over time, lithium-ion batteries are becoming cheaper at about 18% a year. So it's really good news. And I don't know if any of you were following the Tesla battery day. Like this is a game changer. Their 4680 battery is a step change, and so that will reduce cost significantly. And then the second question about cost is, can we as a community find a way to deliver this cheaper? And then some of it is as well about discussion. It's not just about finding the cheapest car, it's about finding a car that will last a long time and spread out its carbon footprint. So the discussion just doesn't need to be focused on the purchase of an immediate car. And then the next is there a role here to campaign for a grant for this particular work to keep the car on the road instead of scrapping it? And then let me move this here. The final thing then is the transition to electric cars is seriously complicated. I was out walking the dog there about an hour ago on the Dublin Road to Howth, and I hardly saw an EV. And the only one I saw was a Model S driving out with the cook guy from Howth, the television program. I forget his name. He was there. The other thing is, on my second day in Facebook, I got expelled from a group on Tuesday. I was utterly shocked, and I was expelled because they said you're selling in this group. You're not allowed to sell in this group, and I didn't feel I was selling. I felt I was trying to have a discussion with the community about this range thing. So it's complicated, and you have to learn to work it and respect where people are at, and so on. And in many other ways, it's not complicated. It's a simple, relatively simple thing to do, and Tesla has embarrassed the hell out of the industry by what they've done. And I have a feeling that the Volkswagen ID platform, the MEV platform, is also going to be a game changer. And then just to say who we are then, it's Barry McMahon is also an engineer. He worked in the medical center, and Barry has a doctorate. And then myself, and I've been an engineer. So we've been working on the electrics for the last 8 years. And you know, that was a need we met. I think the motorbike industry has a bigger challenge than the car industry. Okay, there's serious emission problems in motorbikes, and there isn't a huge choice at all. And then, you know, we're very glad now to join the community and bring our own vision and passion to it, and say, particularly in the area of range, range is not a problem. Range can be fixed. It's a function of the battery size and cost, and you need to make a good decision around that. The last thing I want to say is about social enterprise. Well, why a social enterprise? Okay, and it's a theoretical discussion about, if you want to achieve major social change, you have to have very different agents of change operating together. And so Eamon Ryan has been mentioned, my namesake. Okay, so that's the state sector, government and agencies. So they need to do their thing. The private sector, we've had discussions about the car dealerships and the EV dealerships. That's a really important contribution. And the solar, people selling solar panels and domestic energy solutions, that's important. But the third sector is also very, very significant in affecting change in society. So, you know, you have charities and you have other nonprofits. And within that, there are two different types of engagement. There's volunteer engagement, which is part-time, and then there's some professional engagement. And the biggest group of social enterprise people we kind of don't notice are trade unions. So they have a huge impact on society and changing society. But also what we're suggesting is, within the EV community, you also need social enterprises, full-time people, but whose purpose is to drive the mission of the community and deal with specific problems that volunteer people mightn't be able to do. And so range extension kits is something that's not really going to be done in a systematic way by volunteers. You need full-time people. But it's not it's a commercial thing. We're trying to solve a social problem. We're not trying to sell here. And I think that's important. So there are different actors in the process of change. And what we're saying is, it's important to, you know, to have a social enterprises component, because there are different horses for courses, as they say, and climate change needs us all. And then finally, you know, our collective question as a community is how do we get off the 1% line? Like, it's 14 years I've been watching this. It's frustrating, but certainly I've been 35 years in the nonprofit sector, and if I was to say, collaboration is the most important thing. Okay, lots of people have to work together if we want to affect change. The second is, we need to have a full end-to-end range of solutions, and Tesla is the model for that. Just building cars and not having a charger infrastructure, that's not good. Or you can't have a charging infrastructure if you don't have the grid sorted out. So it's a comprehensive solution. And then it's really important that we communicate with one another and we win over the public. So there's a slow challenge here, not just to talk among ourselves, but to get on radio and television and write articles and convince the public that actually this is real. And, you know, we need to just have a consistent message in that EVs as cars are just simply better, and EVs are cheaper and they last longer and they're cleaner. And, you know, personally, I think the Kodak moment is coming, where the cost of the EVs will drop to a point where the public will just stop buying ICE. And it's just a matter of how do we make that change happen sooner and easier, and make our essential contribution to the climate change problem. Thanks very much for listening to me. I'm really delighted to be here.
Thanks very much, Eamon. Kevin, why don't we take a couple of questions now for Eamon, if we've got them. We'll just take a couple for now, and if there's more, we will revert to doing that in the Q&A at the end. Have you got a couple of questions in there?
Yeah, there's a few here. I can rattle through one or two here. So let me find a hard one. Thanks. This question, this comes from Michael. How does this impact your insurance?
Oh, really good question. Okay, so one thing is to say that the change is UN ECE compliant, so it's not. Is that one thing? The second thing to say is it's not classified as a modification formally under Irish law and British law, and therefore it doesn't actually have any impact on your insurance. It's not a change to the performance of the car, so it doesn't come under the rules of modification, and it doesn't affect your insurance, except that your car is actually more valuable as a result of this. I mean, it's $5,000 more valuable. However, the insurance company mightn't recognize that, say, if you had a write-off of your car, and we've had that with our motorbikes before as well, that they will only pay you the base price, and they won't recognize the fact that you've got a shiny new battery in your car.
Well, one of the values would be space as well. Inga asks, how much space does this take in your boot?
Yep. So for most Leafs, for Gen 2 on, it takes 18 centimeters off the bottom of the boot. It's not too bad. For Gen 1, it's not good.
I'll do one more, Simon, if there's time for it.
Yeah, go on.
There was a question here, interesting one, but can this be used for your house, going from solar into the battery pack?
Absolutely. Like that's great thinking. So this is about the house ecosystem. So Peter Bracken, I see him there. He had a great post in LinkedIn with an image of the battery moving from the car into your house as your system. So I think that's really good news. That these packs, especially if you take a pack out of the car, that makes a great power wall. And Barry took the whole 24 kilowatts and put it in his house himself, and he has 20 350 watt panels on his roof. So he generates all the energy for his house, and he has 3 daughters. They use a lot of energy, and for his 2 cars. He has an Outlander and a Leaf. And that's the big picture. That's the way we need to think, especially in terms of the private citizen. It's a domestic ecosystem where ultimately we generate our own energy, and we reuse the battery pack at 2 levels.
Quick question. You were talking about adding CCS units to cars. For Zoe owners or earlier Zoe owners, adding CCS would be a great advantage.
Yeah.
So is that very expensive? So
it's in the pipeline. Okay, so it's Moxan are doing the tech. So the handshake between the car and the CCS charger is the technically challenging thing, and then you have to buy the kit. I do think it's going to be between $1 and $2 grand. Not cheap.
Not cheap, but we would really make it a lot more useful car.
Yeah, and especially at 175 kilowatt.
Yeah.
Wow. If you get a 100 kilowatt charger down in Monasterevin, Simon is putting in soon, we will. That makes an absolutely enormous difference.
Yeah, 100 kilowatt CCS and 22 kilowatt. There'd be very few cars that could charge as fast.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Eamon. The next thing is the panel discussion. So, Guillaume, I'll hand over to you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Guillaume, and today we're going to talk about used EVs. And so we have 3 professionals with us today, all specialized in used EV retail. So I'll ask each of you to present yourself and what you do, where you're located, and if you have a specialty in your business. Let's start with Phil from Electric Autos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can there. Can you hear me?
Hi, Phil. Yes, perfect.
Cool. Lovely.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. Yes, we started up in EVs. Actually started with 2014. So with EVcompany.com, selling electric vehicle cables online. And when I had trouble trying to get one myself for my first EV, and we seen there was a bit of a business there for it, so we just as a hobby set it up. And I have a history with cars. I'm a big petrol head. For years I was working on cars, classic cars, and I kind of always buying and selling cars on the side as a hobby. And it actually blew up then in retailing kind of the odd EV into something what it is now. It's a business, and we just try get people into EVs as cheap as possible. We could actually make more money and probably better business selling petrol and diesel cars. And there's a garage beside me that does, and they sell way more vehicles than us. But we just do it for, we do, if people want one, we will, but we generally just try to stick to electric and maybe the odd hybrid car. We do a small bit of maintenance on cars as well. I do it myself, but again, this is actually my part-time job. Siobhan is full-time in Electric Autos, and I actually work full-time as an advanced paramedic with the ambulance service. And unfortunately, I have a lot of training and years done in that, and I just can't give it up to dedicate everything to Electric Autos. I just don't know how it's going to go with a mortgage to pay, but I do dedicate a lot of time, and I love meeting new customers and all the people through the industry. Other than that, that's really it. We sell quite good range of EVs, and I like to say there's lots coming on now. There's Ionics and Conus and all the other stuff that's new now is starting to come down, which will be available for people a bit cheaper than what they were advertised for. And that's interesting. Now, still a lot of old stuff around. Like myself, I even have a Fluence there and an IEVOA if I drive myself, and a Twizy. I actually like the older stuff. I like the quirky older stuff, and I hope, obviously, with the extension of batteries there, as we've just been talking about, it'll give them all a new life and a longer range. But that's it, really.
Great, thanks, Phil. Simon, so your company is Next Eco Car, right?
Yeah, so I suppose my background would be IT, which I did up until about 4 years ago. And I guess I got to a stage in my life, I'd always been a petrol head. I did a bit of racing and stuff, and I kind of was always keeping an eye on what was going on with the electric car thing, and I was just really interested to get involved in that. And also from a pollution and climate change perspective as well, and that's hence my involvement with EVoA as well, really trying to drive the thing forward. But yeah, set up Next Eco Car 3 years ago, and yeah, we've been selling used EVs since then. I'd say predominantly we've sold, over and above anything else, Nissan Leafs would be the biggest sellers, but a lot of Renault Zoes, Outlander Fevs, and that sort of stuff would be the big sellers. But as Phil says, there's now more options. Certainly the last couple of years have been more models coming out, so what we'll be able to offer will be greater in future. Yeah, and like the other guys, we offer accessories, so chargers and cables and things like that as well. But yeah, I know Phil since I started this as well, and I think we have a good relationship and a good sort of collaboration there. So yeah, that's pretty positive as well. It's great to hear.
Thanks. And finally, we have Maciej. Let's start with you, Phil, maybe for first question. So you've been doing this job for many years. So if I'm coming as and I want to buy my first EV, what kind of specific research I should carry out in comparison to buying a used petrol or diesel car? Do you have to do some specific homework?
Yeah, you have to make sure what you're buying suits you. Are you buying a commuter car to go 20 kilometers a day back and forward to work? Are you looking for something that's going to be more high usage? Can you charge at home? Can you afford? What kind of budget have you got? Some people are expecting a 2012 Nissan Leaf to do the same thing as a 2019 Nissan Leaf. They don't. So you need to get something that suits you size-wise as well. Is an IEVOA big enough for you? Is a Zoe? Like some people buy EVs and they want to buy an EV, but they can't charge at home, or they've 7 kids and they just doesn't fit what a normal petrol and diesel kind of range has. Like the internal combustion engine kind of range. There's loads of different cars at the moment. The EVs suffer slightly with that. 7-seaters are lacking. Estate cars, MPVs are all small hatchbacks. You need to get what suits you. So we get people to come along, bring the buggies, whatever you need, fit it inside the car, get inside the car, make sure it suits you. And sometimes you have to tell people, no, maybe it just doesn't suit you. Maybe your budget of 10 grand won't do that range. Try, come back or push it up, or maybe try again at another stage. Not EVs suit everyone. We don't convince people or try to push people into EVs. If people come to us, we'll give them the knowledge, bit of information, and if it suits them, we'll put one into an EV. But if it doesn't suit them, it'll only cause you more stress and headache. Some people are that keen to get into it, though. They do, you know, just people that live in apartments and all that, and they have adapted to change to get chargers done. But I still know people that go down to the local charge point to charge. I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to do it all the time. It's just so handy. I'm lazy. You just get into the driveway, you plug it in, charge my car every 2 or 3 days. And I love that. I don't think I could get up off the couch after a tired work in the evening and head down to the charger in the middle of winter. But some people do. But obviously charging at work as well, if you have that in, it's a big advantage.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, some people have faith and they really want an EV, and they have to kind of pay the price, I suppose, to get there. A question for Simon now. When someone is coming to you looking to purchase a used EV, are they questioning the state of health of the battery? And how do you have to do as a buyer to overcome that? Because if you buy a new vehicle, you're going to get 100% good batteries, but as a used one, it's a bit more complicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on the customer. I mean, it's fair to say that, you know, probably 75% of people that come to me will have done a bit of research already and probably already know that they need to understand that what they're going to buy has good battery health. Some people are completely oblivious, and with those people, it's more a question of educating them almost and saying, you know, look, this is something you should be looking at, because, and one of the things I always do is, you know, try and give people as much information as possible so that if they don't buy from me, they're forewarned if they buy privately or somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, some cars are easier to check than others. I mean, certainly there are some fairly cheap diagnostic tools that you can use with the Leaf. Leaf Spy is a great one for checking the battery health. Some matter of having an app and OBD dongle, which, you know, you can get everything set up for about €50 to check the health of a Leaf. And I wouldn't buy a Leaf without doing that. Some people will not know that they can do that and just go off of the you know, the bars on the display of the dashboard, which gives you basically a broad look at what the car is, where it's at, but it doesn't tell you much about how it's been charged, whether it's been probably rapid charge, slow charge, and so on, which can also play into the health of the battery, which is important. Similar tools exist for Renault Zoe as well, so you can use a diagnostic to check the health on those as well. BMW i3s, you can do similar. Other cars, you're probably more looking at going into what the manufacturers can provide. So, but yeah, I mean, for the cars that we would sell most, it's pretty easy, and that's something that we always check.
Good. Yeah. Does it happen to have? I mean, I'm asking to you, Simon, or Phil, or Maciej, if you have people actually demanding like a certificate or a report from the dealer or something like this? Is it something that you've had to provide in the past, or do you have solutions for people really demanding about it?
From my point of view, I mean, if it's a Leaf, then happy to give them the Leaf Spy report. Some people will demand to see that before they'll even come look at a car, and that's fine. It's easy done. Yeah, I mean, I'll provide it if people ask for it. Oftentimes I'll provide it even if they don't. But yeah, I mean, I think you're maybe alluding to warranties, which is a different subject. Yeah, I mean, in terms of warranties, it's really looking at what the manufacturer provides at the moment. Third-party warranties won't cover batteries, unfortunately. So if a car is outside the battery warranty, then, you know, it's kind of at your own risk. There's not much you can do. The dealer could say, yeah, I'll guarantee your battery forever, but I personally wouldn't do that, because you don't know how the battery's going to be used, and it would be a bit like warranting a petrol car and say, yeah, I'll warranty your engine forever, which you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I'd be interested in the other guys' experience and what they do as well from that point of view.
Yeah, so regarding the report that Nissan give you when you service your vehicle, they give you a battery report, and It doesn't tell you an awful lot about the battery. People see it and it has 5 stars across the board, but it doesn't give you any idea what the battery health is. I'm not too sure how the diagnostics on the Nissan printout comes up, but it doesn't give you much idea. But generally, sometimes you might say to a main dealer, can I get a report? They'll give you that. Doesn't tell you much. You kind of really need the leaf spike to get into the actual battery health and to have a look and see how it performs. That you can, if anyone wants it, if anyone's worried about the batteries, yeah, I'm always glad to get engineers out. We sell a lot of cars blind, so they can get a private engineer. We can kind of go out and people can assess them, or we can leave them with the main dealers for diagnostics. We have no problem at all if the customer is willing to do that, and you know they might pay for it. We'll drop it down if they're ever nervous. But realistically, the more knowledge is ourselves, me and Simon that sell them, but also in the community there. There's a lot of guys that know a lot more than some of the guys that sell these cars in main dealerships. They would actually know the ins and outs, the common faults. If you follow, we follow a lot of the forums, so there's Zoe, Tesla, the whole lot, and you see the issues that come with these cars, and it's this kind of insider knowledge you can build up in the background that gives us a bit of a heads up on everyone else, you know.
Maciej, can you tell us about yourself a bit, please, and then I have a question for you.
So I'm in the business around 3 years myself. I'm originally from Poland, so you can hear my accent, and sorry about my language as well. It's not my first language, English. Well, so I started driving electric car privately around 5 years ago. I just try avoid the cost of diesel on the service of the cars, all the stuff. Going around because I do the high mileage on my way work, around 150 kilometers every day. And then I just bought a first Nissan Leaf with a very, very tiny mileage, probably around 5,000 kilometers on the clock, nice Tecna. And I done 55,000 kilometers on the first year I used the Nissan Leaf. Then I just realized, so that's the way, Then I started love the electric cars, and we start running the page on Polish page, fan page about electric cars, and kind of everything grow up, and we see lack of dealers like me and Phil and Simon, and so we try to provide the people some kind of information about the cars, not just only sell the cars. I don't know what they say. Yeah, so like we in the business from 2018, so we sold a few cars already, and then now we just expand our business on electric mopeds and kind of more stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, so, it's a very strange year, so it's kind of quiet for me for the cars. Yes. I don't know how on your boys, like in Phil and Simon.
Just up and down.
Yeah,
that's the way.
Yeah.
So Maciej, I've got a question for you now. So when there is a petrol or a diesel customer coming and knocking at your door, what are the questions they commonly ask? And do they have any concerns in general besides what we've talked about before, which is, maybe the battery health? Anything else?
So depends what's the research the customer done before he came in, Some customers know exactly nothing about electric cars. So like just come in completely blank and you have to say everything about it. Like, I just start from the basic, like don't just go into the batteries, blah, blah, just no. Some customers have a good research before they come in. So like they know something about electric cars, just you want to try first, you get a test drive, ask the question, and we can actually say something because we use the electric cars on the like everyday cars. So basically depend on the customer, we try just see what the customer expect from us. And if they know nothing, we just start from the basics and they just follow into the more details, And yeah.
I've got my next question for Phil now. Some Zoes have battery leases. And so, I mean, you all of you have sold Zoes with and without battery leases, and that's a bit of a difficult sometimes for the customer to know about those. What are the options for customers, Phil? And I hear now they have the option to buy back the lease, and so how does this work?
Yeah, so Zoes and Leafs were the only thing at one stage in Ireland that we were selling. They were the only used EVs that were out there, two really good cars. The battery lease on the Zoe was always a bit of an issue trying to sell it to people. You know, they see a car that looks kind of reasonably priced compared to the Leaf, and you're trying to explain that you don't own the vehicle. I think people in Ireland like to own everything. They're not as big on as leasing or renting as they are in other European countries. So the whole kind of, it's news to them that you have to lease the battery. Now, the whole uncertainty of how long the battery's going to last, the leasing kind of backed that up, and you don't own the battery if it ever goes wrong. But it's proved with Renault's little software glitch, which Nissan would do something with the Leaf as well. The battery health on the Zoe was well improved, and they're fantastic. And I know one or two Zoe batteries that have gone bust over time, but they're all fairly new cars, and they were all covered under warranty. How you explain to people and how you get around it is it's taken part of the cost away. You get into an EV cheaper. You can get into a 40 kilowatt battery lease car for a very reasonable price if you're down on budget, and kind of take the battery lease in as your fuel, and just see how you work out what the car will cost you a month to run compared to an internal combustion car. You can actually buy them out. So RCI, I don't know if they leaked it, but I was talking to, I found this out a little while ago, and that they were talking about, and I got all the information on buying the batteries, but it actually never happened until now. So RCI will let you now purchase the battery. So if you get onto the guys in RCI, there's a guy called David Walsh, you contact them and they will let you purchase the battery. There's a bit of haggling space as well. So whatever they first quote you, I know of guys that have gone there, and so the Fluence that I have at the moment was battery leased, and the guy that was trading it in, I kind of said, listen, yeah, the battery lease Fluence is a hard sell, but a battery lease, it's even a harder sell. And he went to RCI, and he talked to him 2 or 3 times, and he got the price down to, I think, around 600 or 700 euros, down from nearly 1,500 euros, I believe, to purchase the battery. And now the battery health is 79% on mine, so I made sure I checked the battery health, and that there's no point in getting rid of the lease when the battery needs replacing. But if you talk to RCI, you can buy the battery; they'll give you a price, and you just kind of haggle with them. But again, some people still might like the battery lease; makes the car cheaper, and it's the whole surety of if the battery goes wrong.
Yeah, it's good to have the option. Simon, I know the clock is ticking, so we'll move a bit. I've got a question for you regarding plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles and battery electric vehicles. I mean, you are importing vehicles yourself, and today, this year, for each electric vehicle, pure battery electric vehicle imported, was 7 plug-in hybrids. So there's a lot of those cars coming in. So what's happening? What's happening with this market? And the follow-up question will be, what about next year with the change of VRT and Brexit? What is going to be the impact on 2021, in your opinion?
Yeah, the first part might be easier to answer than the second part. I don't have a crystal ball. So I think the thing with the FEVs is that they're pretty good value, and it wouldn't also, I think, it wouldn't just be people like the 3 of us here on this call selling FEVs. I think a lot of traditional dealers are selling a lot of FEVs as well. So there are more people going and getting cars and bringing them in. And I think that accounts for the numbers. And I think the reason that is because, you know, people are still nervous about going full EV. They're dipping a toe in the water with a plug-in. We all have our views on whether that's the right or wrong thing to do. In the short term, it's a good option for a lot of people because they are good value. And if you have a fairly short commute, then you can still do most of your daily driving on full electric and get all the benefits of charging at home and so on. Obviously, if you're getting into longer journeys in those sort of vehicles, then you're not really getting the benefit. And you've got 2 drivetrains to maintain potentially as well. So it swings and roundabouts. I don't have an issue with FEVs. Happy to, we generally don't hold in stock, but we do sell them to order if people come to us. And yeah, Outlanders, Mercedes C350Es been really popular this year. So and they're both good, reliable cars. And I can see why people are buying them. So I think the numbers is probably more to do with availability. Because I think a lot of traditional dealers are still erring away from selling full electrics because they don't really understand how to sell them as well as I think we do have them. In terms of next year, I think Brexit is going to be a bigger driver than anything else for those of us that are importing cars, and we don't still have a clear steer on that. So I don't really know how to answer that question. I think, you know, since the NOx tax came in as part of the VRT last year, that certainly knocked the import market for diesels massively, which is good point of view. I think from a climate change and pollution point of view, certainly as well. And yeah, the mechanism by which VRT is charged is changing, which means that, you know, EVs will still be good value. I think it's more stick on the side of dissuading people away from ICE cars than it is more carrot for EVs. But I still think it's positive.
Yes. And about so the VRT is changing as well. So that question is open for any of you. Are there some type of vehicles, like whether they are hybrids or electrics, that you would buy before the end of the year, preferably, or the other way around, you should wait next year to get them? So
Okay.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. So there's been cars imported into Ireland all the time, and there's more cars imported into Ireland than sold new. It's actually quite big numbers. We actually just don't have the turnaround of used vehicles in Ireland. So it's either the Japanese market, which was quite good and quite popular a good few years ago, and now it's kind of with sterling the way it went. It was the UK market for the last couple of years too. We don't know when Brexit comes in how it's going to change it. But what we do know is next year cars are going to be dearer. Like I had a customer saying that I'm going to wait till next year to get me EV. You know, if you're looking at the 7% VRT on a 10 grand car, I think it's €700. And if, you know, depends how Brexit goes, you might have import tax, you're going to have VAT, and you're going to have a lot more of the car. So your EV might actually be worth more next year if you go to sell it. But if you're going to buy a car now, whether it be petrol, diesel, or EV, I think it's going to be cheaper this year than it is next year.
Yes. A question from Maciej. We haven't heard too much about you. Tell me, mopeds, electric mopeds, it's a bit your specialty. Traditionally, Ireland hasn't been very, very keen on motorbikes or mopeds, 50cc's. So how does this work? Do you sell a few of them? Do you have any specific interest? I see there was quite a few variety on your website.
Yeah, we have a good few models. The good kind of choice is probably around 12 models, 12 different models from probably 3 or 4 different companies. Then we just brought first few last year, just for try. That's it, you know. And the last year is quiet. I see lots of people more interested about the mopeds this year. But probably about the public transport. Probably people try to get out of the buses or something, you know, try some different way to go to work. Some people can't afford the car, maybe, you know, and this mopeds probably is a price range starts from 2,000, you know, euro. So like get moped for 2,000 euro with 40-50 kilometers range. So like, and the charge this moped is probably a few cents, probably 20-30 cents to full charge. And then kind of there's a different way to go. Like, yeah, you can see people more more interesting now about the mopeds. I actually sold one 10 minutes ago when I'm gone here.
Well, that's good.
And I think they gets more popular next year and next year and next year. So like that'd be kind of idea for the different way to go to work and even for the weekend ride, you know.
Yes, that makes sense. And actually, just jump onto the Twizy. Has anyone sold a Twizy? Phil, you have one, but
I sold
any
one.
lunatic bought one?
Yeah. I got one first and I had no doors on it. Wow. A guy actually bought it and exported it to what place is it? I think it's off the American coast, Antigua. I think that's where he was, but he had a holiday kind of home over there. And then I got another one with doors. And I haven't tried to sell it yet. I keep meaning to. It just needs an NCT. I don't drive it as much. I haven't got that much time to play in it anymore. And they're looking to get an NCT on it and maybe get a move when I ever get time. But no, I haven't sold one. But yeah, they are fun. They're a good advertising vehicle as well. You know, to park outside pubs or businesses or to get around small estates or industrial premises. They are tough though. They're a hard ride. The suspension's quite tough on them, but they are very fun. I would actually love to. I was thinking of holding on to it and maybe getting a little trailer as a battery extension, and actually just having a really long range, and going off in it. But I just don't know if time lets at the moment.
Yeah. I have a last question, and then I'll hand it back to you, Simon. Question open for everyone. What do you guys think about the Toyota self-charging advertising campaign?
Start.
Go on, you start, Simon. No bad language.
No, I think I say this to most people. It's like I think it's very disingenuous, and I think it's very dishonest, and it's preying on people's lack of knowledge, which is really, really sad. And the sad thing for me is that they're actually really good cars. It's a shame that Toyota haven't done more with like PHEVs or full electric yet, but surely will, because they'll have to. But they're holding the transition back with what they're doing, and maybe that will come home to roost for them. I used to get really angry and upset about it. Now I choose to focus on the more positive aspects of what we're doing, because I don't think you can fight an organization like Toyota and they're completely non-responsive. And ultimately, I think when it comes to advertising, their adverts have been banned in other territories, and I think all we can do is remind the ombudsman here that is the case. And yeah, it's pretty sad and disappointing from my point of view. I wish they'd just be honest about what their cars are, because they're good cars actually, but they're not electric cars.
Yeah, I think it's a very clever bit of marketing. They're getting the range. They're not between fully electric, but where everyone is at the moment. They're trying to get them into something that they think is economical. Well, they are more economical than a standard car. But they are just kind of cornering that end of it. They are pushing it. It isn't very dishonest. You know, they're trying to tell you, it drives on 50 or 70% of the time in electric. They obviously not driving from Dublin to Belfast at 120 kilometers an hour. And you know yourself, the information that the industry gives you suits themselves.
All right, thanks a lot, guys, for all this. I know we went a bit over time, so with no further ado, back to you, Simon.
Okay, then let's move on quickly to Elena. Let's hand over to Elena, who's going to tell us about ELVES.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. My name is Elena, and I'm here from ELVES to talk to you about a program we operate, which is called Electric ELVES, which obviously is hopefully of interest to you as a group. So just to kind of, before I talk too much about Electric ELVES itself, I thought it would be good to give you a bit of background about who ELVES is, so you can kind of understand the context under which we're delivering the Electric ELVES program. So ELVES is the compliance scheme for end-of-life vehicles in Ireland, where our full name is ELV Environmental Services. And we were approved by the Minister for Communications, Climate Action and Environment from the 1st of January 2017 to act as the compliance scheme for the sector. So we're a non-profit company, but we're funded by our members, and those are producer members. So they are new and used vehicle importers that fund the organisation. And we've basically been set up to deliver on their requirements under the end-of-life vehicle regulations. So that's kind of, I suppose, our purpose. In terms of what we do on a wider level outside of the Electric Elves programme, so we have a network of authorised treatment facilities that provide free recycling of scrap cars and small vans. We do a lot of work to promote the right way to scrap a vehicle, so making sure that people know that when they do come to scrap their car, they need to use an authorised treatment facility and they need to get a certificate of destruction, which ends their responsibility for that vehicle. Some of you may have received motor tax reminders in the last few months, and they included a flyer which we worked on with the Department of Transport, which is basically a flyer telling people what their responsibilities are when they come to scrap a vehicle. And then one of our key objectives in terms of us as an organisation is to make sure that the end-of-life vehicles that come through our network meet the 85% and 95% reuse, recycling and recovery targets. So these are set out under the end-of-life vehicle regulations, and we have to make sure that our network meets those. And then we do basically a variety of projects that help that network and I suppose the country as well to a degree meet those reuse, recycling and recovery targets. So that's kind of just a very brief overview of ELVES and who we are and what we do. Just before I move on, I thought it'd be useful just to clarify a few terms I use a lot, but are not necessarily familiar to anyone outside of this sector. So firstly, ELV is an end-of-life vehicle. Most people refer to it as a scrap car. An ATF, so that's an authorised treatment facility. So an ATF is basically a scrapyard that has a waste permit to accept scrap cars for recycling. And finally, when it comes to, obviously very important when it comes to our Electric Elves programme, is industrial battery. So when I say industrial batteries, I'm talking about the batteries in electrified vehicles, so anything from a micro hybrid through to a full electric, but I'm basically talking about the nickel metal hydride and the lithium ion batteries that are in hybrid and electric vehicles. So, Electric Elves. So it's probably a good point to start with what we're not as an organisation. We get very confused at this time of year in the run up to Christmas. We're not just for Christmas, we're not Christmas elves. We're also not a 1960s rock band, which is the other thing that comes up if you put Electric Elves into Google. We're quite different from both of those two. What we actually are is, or the programme is even, it's an end-of-life programme for the industrial batteries from electrified vehicles. So we started the programme in May 2018 when we rolled it out to all authorised treatment facilities around the country. And it also covers after sales as well now too. I suppose it's important to say, because as an organisation, we have a network of authorised treatment facilities, but that's not all the authorised treatment facilities in the country. However, for our Electric Elves programme, it does cover all authorised treatment facilities around the country, and it's provided free of charge to those businesses. And the purpose of the programme is to deliver on the end-of-life vehicle regulations and the battery regulations, because the industrial batteries in these vehicles come under two different sets of producer responsibility obligations. In terms of why we set it up, this is obviously new technology for authorised treatment facilities. So these are quite often businesses that have been in business for many years, taking back and recycling cars. However, electrified vehicles are obviously new, and they've come with new health and safety risks, particularly the ones with the larger batteries, high voltage batteries. That's obviously something they have to be very aware of and trained up for. There is a producer responsibility obligation to provide collection and recycling of the batteries, so we make sure we deliver on that. At the moment, the volume is very small, reaching end of life, but we know obviously that's going to increase, so we need to prepare the ATFs for the future. As I've already mentioned, we have very high targets to meet for the recycling of end-of-life vehicles. So it's 85% reuse and recycling, so that's spare parts basically, and recycling of the materials. A lot of it's obviously metal from a vehicle, but it's 95% if you include recovery in that target as well. So recovery is normally waste to energy, for example. And the industrial batteries in these vehicles will need to contribute to these targets, particularly obviously as the volume of them grows. So in terms of what we offer under the programme, we offer model-specific dismantling information. So when I say dismantling, this is about removing the battery from the vehicle. It's not about dismantling the battery, it's about removing the battery from the vehicle safely. We provide training for ATFs. We also provide additional manufacturer support if the vehicle or the battery is damaged, and we provide free collection and recycling of the batteries. The idea of the programme is basically to be a scalable logistics programme that can obviously grow as the volume of these that are reaching end of life does also grow, which we're obviously anticipating in the near future. However, what we're dealing with at the moment, this kind of just gives you a bit of an idea as to where we're at, I suppose, because, you know, I suppose you as a group talk a lot about where the market is at in terms of new or maybe second-hand EVs. We're looking at the ones that are now reaching end of life, which obviously there's quite a few years between new and end of life. So the volume at the moment is still very small, but those that are reaching end of life, particularly for ones with lithium-ion batteries, you can see from the graph, and I'm sure most of you are aware, you know, the early electrified vehicles would have been hybrids with nickel metal hydride batteries, obviously lithium-ion in the last sort of 10 or so years. But because of, you know, the age a vehicle needs to get to before it reaches true end of life, they're not necessarily reaching end of life yet. So we estimate a regular sort of diesel or petrol car, the average life is around 15 years. For electrified vehicle, jury's still a little bit out. It could be longer than a diesel or petrol, could be shorter, you know, depending on what's happening with the battery. But at the moment, you know, it's basically kind of a bit of a wait and see in terms of the age of the vehicles. But in terms of what's arising at the moment at end of life, we have to be prepared for everything from a micro hybrid through to a full electric, which means we're dealing with both battery chemistries, but also battery weights ranging from about 2 kilograms to 600 plus. But it does mean that at the moment, particularly for lithium-ion, most of those that are rising at end of life are not true end of life. They're kind of crash damaged or faulty batteries that are rising at this point in time. In terms of what we do for training, so that's kind of, this is sort of, I suppose, to prepare ATFs for before they even receive an electrified vehicle. For recycling, we provide them training, which is a one-day classroom and workshop-based training. So the mornings in the classroom, the afternoons in the workshop with a demonstration vehicle. It's provided free to all ATFs, and it covers a range of issues, including how to identify an electrified vehicle, the key safety risks they have to be aware of, a basic shutdown procedure, where they need to go to get more information, particularly on different make and models. We're very clear, we kind of show them a basic shutdown procedure, but are very clear that before they get even close to working on one of these vehicles, they need to do their research. They need to know what they're dealing with and how to make sure they can remove that battery safely, because it does vary vehicle to vehicle. The training itself has been very well received by ATFs, and we've trained over 90 people so far. We've been running that training for about the last year or so. So next, I've just got a very short video I'll play. Hopefully it'll work. It's always a bit of a hit and miss on presentations. This is a very short video about our training, and I'll just hit go on this. Hopefully that should. The ELVES training is awareness training for authorised treatment facilities on handling of electric, hybrid and mild hybrid vehicles.
Training today has been an overview of how electric and hybrid vehicles work, the risks that are associated with them, and how then to minimise and mitigate all of those risks to keep the staff themselves and their businesses safe.
The programme provides a variety of support, including free collection and recycling of hybrid and electric batteries. We also can direct authorised treatment facilities further information on specific models and marks. And we can also provide additional support in the event that the vehicle and potentially the battery also is damaged. We're right at the very start of the electrification of the vehicle park. That we know from things like the Climate Change Action Plan, it's an area that's only going to increase. And so we need to make sure that authorised treatment facilities have the skills needed, to make sure they can safely handle these, they can depollute them, and they can recycle them when they reach end of life. Okay, so I hope that gave you just a bit more insight, I suppose, into the training that we're providing under the programme. Hang on, sorry. There we go. So the training is designed to support ATFs before they receive the vehicles. They know what they're looking out for and how to get prepared. But when they do receive a vehicle, I suppose the first step for us is information provision. So the idea of the programme of rolling it out to all authorised treatment facilities in the country is to make sure there's one point of contact for ATFs, no matter what the make or model. So they're not sort of scrambling around trying to find the phone number for a particular make or mark. They call us and then we direct them in the right direction. And to make sure that those ATFs have access to that latest information in terms of that make and model and how to remove the batteries safely, and also to provide the additional manufacturer support if they need it at that point. And then, very importantly, under the programme, I suppose, was the core objective or the core original, I suppose, initiative behind setting up the programme was to provide for the collection and recycling of the batteries. So we provide this, as I said, to ATFs and after sales, but it's collection and recycling of batteries is, in some ways, it's quite a complex process. It has to deliver on the producer responsibility obligations under regulation, but it also has to operate under waste and transport regulations. So there's a variety of different waste transportation regulations out there that kind of dictate how these batteries have to be handled when they're moved. And also these come under transport regulations like ADR, which is the dangerous goods movement regulations. So, for example, lithium ion is considered a dangerous good, and therefore it has to have specific requirements in terms of its packaging and labelling when it is moved. So under the programme, as you can see here to the top right, that is one of the packaging boxes that we have under the programme. So as you can see, it's not a small piece of packaging, but that's basically designed specifically for lithium ion batteries and transporting them. Has two layers of packaging, obviously an outer case and an inner case. It also has a fire suppression system built into the box in case anything should happen when that battery is being transported. And in terms of the collection and recycling of the batteries, we obviously collect them from wherever is needed in the country, and then they are shipped overseas for recycling, because there's no there's collection facilities here, but no recycling facilities here, so they have to be shipped to continental Europe for their recycling. So just looking forward to the future. This is kind of a changing area. Obviously, it's a changing area across the board, across the whole life cycle of EVs, because it's something that's obviously growing so rapidly. So we are obviously anticipating what that market growth will mean for our programme in terms of the number and the volume that start to arise at end of life. And we're also looking at that kind of increase in volume against a background of changing regulation that we know is happening. So, as I said, the programme's designed to deliver on the requirements of the end-of-life vehicle regulations, but also the battery regulations. And these are the regulations that, at a national level, put into place the ELV and battery directives, which are written, obviously, at a European level. And both those directives at European level are being revised at the moment. So we are expecting quite a lot of change to come in the next year or two under both those sets of regulations. So we're expecting, for example, higher and potentially material-specific recycling targets at the moment for batteries. So at the moment, they form part of the ELV target, which is the 85 and 95%. But there's also a battery-specific recycling target, which is set out in the battery regulations. We're expecting that target to go up. We're also expecting a better consideration of reuse and repurposing. So at the moment, reuse is considered under the ELV directive, but repurposing isn't. So when I say reuse and repurposing, I'm making the difference between reuse, which is a battery getting put back into another car for reuse, and repurposing where it goes into another application. So for example, a Powerwall. And in the batteries directive, reuse and repurposing isn't currently considered at all at the moment. So it will, obviously, they need to update both those directives to better account for those different steps in the life cycle. And we're also expecting a wider range of vehicles under the ELV directive. There's a bit of talk about that now. So at the moment, ELV directive covers M1 and N1 cars, so that's passenger cars and small vans. There is a bit of discussion now about increasing the range of vehicles that come under the directive. So, for example, we could see things like trucks included under the directive at some point in the future. And finally, we're also very aware of efforts across Europe and obviously locally to, I suppose, transition to a circular economy. So that's obviously from a regulatory perspective, that might bring other aspects that we have to consider under the programme, but also I suppose just in terms of our objectives for the programme, in terms of making making sure that it does contribute to that transition as best it possibly can. So that was about it from me. I hope you found that sort of interesting and useful in terms of, I suppose, a bit of an insight into some of the systems that are in place, or the system that is in place to help manage EVs when they do reach end of life.
Thanks, Eleanor. Really appreciate you doing that and taking the time to share that information today. I found it fascinating that this was already going on in Ireland when I first heard you talk about this at the EV Summit. So hopefully everyone gets something out of that. Kevin, have we got any questions for Eleanor specifically? And we'll maybe take a couple of questions and then we can move on to the open section.
Yeah, there's nothing like super specific, but I think this is for Eleanor, and I think it could probably go to everyone, but this came in when Eleanor was talking, but it's how does Brexit affect all of this stuff? Like you're talking about EU legislation, and we're talking about the guys who are buying and selling cars. This will be a question for them after as well. But like, how does Brexit affect this, if at all?
I suppose I probably, like everyone's still watching Brexit. For us, we deal with the recycling side of things, and that is obviously governed by a lot of EU regulation. And so it's something that we're monitoring in terms of waste transfers. Say, for example, if material goes from here to the UK, that's where Brexit may kick in. There's obviously a lot of efforts to make that transition as less least problems as possible. And it is, so we work under EU regulation, but we also work under a lot of international waste regulation, which, for example, the UK would apply to the UK whether they're in Europe or not, which does help us in terms of standardization. But yeah, like with everybody, it's kind of waiting and watching.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Eleanor. We'll press on and do the Q&A now.
With a few questions in here. I'll start with the last question I asked, just for the other panelists, particularly with the idea of kind of importing and exporting cars and parts and stuff. How do you see Brexit impacting Ireland and the Irish market? Throw it open to anyone who's on the panel.
So I'll make a little stab at that. I was talking to someone in revenue, and with bringing vehicles in, at the point of entry, I believe people will have to pay your VAT and import duty. So I don't know how it's going to work with the NCT, where you VRT it now. I believe it'll all be done as you come in. You'll declare it like declaring any goods you're importing. And I also believe you're coming down from the north. I've been told that there's possibly, don't hold me to it now, there will be an area you'll voluntarily will come in and you'll pull into where you'll declare your goods that you're coming into Europe, and you'll pay your VAT and VRT while you're there. If you skip it and go by, you'll get done, and for like any importing anything, we're paying duty. Revenue will be around, and I suppose a yellow reg car on the road will be like an absolute a torch. They'll be shining, so people will be pulling them. I think it'd be harder to drive around because you'll have to declare any goods coming into from outside Europe, as you would anyway. The way you get goods in from China at the moment, and you still have to, like Japanese import cars, you still have to at the docks pay your VAT and your VRT and the whole lot before you import it. It'll make it a bit harder to do. Big importers of vehicles will have customs agents that will handle all that. If you are a TAN registered dealer, which allows you, like I am, so basically I can hold goods without paying my import duty. Basically I've been on my premises for as long as I can. It's only when I go to sell it then I have to do it. So if you're kind of a TAN registered dealer, you'll get around it a bit easier. But for private guys importing from the UK, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare.
Can I actually just add on to that one, with experience of importing cars from outside of Europe? So I might have mentioned, and I'm sure a few of you guys before may have known this already. I'm also into like classic cars and American cars and stuff. So I got to pay the customs and excise and VAT before you can get the car. But then you have the same process as normal of 30 days for the NCT. So it's kind of two separate things. And I don't know if the TAN thing changes it, but certainly for anyone importing it privately, it's two separate steps. But you won't get the car released to you until you pay your VAT and excise and customs duty, which is quite substantial.
Yeah, it's I recently, as a bit of a Brexit mitigation, went through the process of bringing in a couple of cars from Japan, just to kind of see what the experience would be like, because it will be the same. And it's, yeah, there's more cost up front, and yeah, there's more paperwork and stuff to deal with, and if you to employ a customs agent, then you've more fees that side as well. So it's, yeah, it will be harder for individuals to import cars for sure. It will be harder for dealers as well, but we'd be better set up to deal with it. But it will add cost, which means, you know, that will ultimately be passed on to the consumer. So it's not ideal.
Can I just comment as well that there might be a bit of short-term chaos driving through the UK, so we're concerned about that, bringing in the extension batteries. That we expect huge queues, and the direct ferry to France will be booked out for months ahead. So there's just a short-term chaos potential before they iron out the streamlining it.
Cool. I'm just, before I go to the question, Sean, you put your hand up. Do you want to ask a question in the group here? No.
Simon?
Yeah.
Simon?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now, yeah?
I can hear you, yeah.
Simon? Okay, Simon, thanks for taking the question. Simon, I've only signed up there. I've only seen about this the last few days, and I signed in. But I just, in case I can be of any help to anybody, I've imported a BMW i3 from the UK. And again, if anybody wants to talk to me about my experience with that, and the fact that it was previously crashed, and I had to get various certs, and then I also had to get a retrospective NOx cert, and it all took quite a bit of time. But now that I've learned what the process is, if anyone wants to have the benefit of my experience, plus the benefit, very short, albeit, of driving around in that BMW for the last 2 weeks, feel free to contact me. If I need to give some contact number, Simon or whoever's in charge there can feel free to use my email address or phone number or whatever. Okay, lads, thanks.
I would say, Sean, probably like the Facebook group, if you're part of that, then maybe make a post on there. You know,
again, because I'm only newcomer, Simon, what group is that? Which group is that?
It's the Irish EV Owners Association.
Oh yeah, yeah, IEVOA. Okay,
yeah.
Right. Make a post on that.
Yeah.
Do you recommend putting up a phone number? Is it safe to put up a phone number, or am I better just putting up an email address? Maybe an email address. Yeah.
I'd normally say, I mean, if you're on Facebook, then you're on Messenger as well. Like if people want to interact with you, then they ask them to send you a personal message, and then from there, if you want to give people a phone number or whatever, then that's fine. But yeah, it's entirely up to you how you want to handle it. Yeah, that's normally the way most people operate.
Okay. Well done, lads. Thanks for the forum, and thanks for your efforts.
Thanks, Sean. Next, this is probably for Philip, Eleanor, or Eamon. But someone asked, I actually have never heard an answer to this myself. Where do you go to source a battery? If you're looking for a battery for a car or even for your house, where do you go to find one?
There's a few different places you can go. So are you new or used? So basically, there's a lot of people are doing projects and they're using used batteries. And that's generally from crash cars. There is a salvage options that sell written off cars that you can buy a Leaf from. We actually bought a Leaf and a Zoe, and we parted them out to people because at that stage we were looking to kind of getting into used parts. We got them in, we sold the batteries very quickly, a lot of the parts, and that's where we got it from. But you'd need the space, you need the time to do this. and you know, I haven't taken another one in since. But used cars, but you can buy battery packs online. If you go online, you can actually see. I was looking at someone done an IEVOA battery cell replacements. There's a video online, and you can actually buy nearly the exact same pack online. So they can be bought new and used, but it's just getting them. I see them when you come into breakers yards, and I talk to a few breakers, and the first thing that's gone out of an EV is the battery pack is sold. Very, very rarely you'll get them hanging around.
If I come in and say that, yeah, there are three sources. So one is that you can purchase new cells. I mean, there's massive manufacturer in China. So we've purchased through EV Europe and New Electric. They're both in the Netherlands. So you can buy new cells, both lithium iron phosphate and lithium ion cells. But the complex, if you get raw cells, you need a battery management system properly. The second is contact ELVES. So it's people who are recycling cells for reuse. So and the third then is the Elena had the right term for the scrappage places. So that's where you just need to look for the packs from Nissans and Zoes that have been totaled.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's authorised treatment facilities are the sites that have the waste permits to recycle cars and sell the parts. So obviously they would be potential source for used batteries. But I would just say, yeah, just make sure you use an authorised treatment facilities, because there are a lot of illegal breakers out there, and obviously the ones with the waste permits, they have monitoring by their local authority. You know, the car has to go through a depollution process where things like, okay, not so much for EVs, but oils and stuff like that are taken out. They're basically more responsibly managed if they go through an authorised treatment facility, and that's basically the legal route. So
cool. Another question is kind of on a similar vein, I think, but at what point should someone, if they've got an EV and they're thinking of upgrading a new battery, whatever it might be, what's the cutoff point? Like, where do you kind of go, this isn't worth doing it? Or is that point, does that exist?
Yeah, that point does exist. It's when the car becomes unusable for that person. So that's a question we get asked quite often when people buy a new or used EV. When do I need to replace the battery? When the car stops doing what it's doing for you. Like if you're only using a small range of the car and your battery has quite a big range, it'll be a long time before the car comes unusable. But before that happened, people would generally upgrade either just to go up the years in their car or just to get something that's more modern. They'll go up, and when you do, you'll get something with a bigger range. You don't have to worry about the battery. But once the car does what it needs to do, that's when you need to you're okay. When it starts being a headache and not getting around, maybe then upgrade to new EV, or now that we have to be able to extend the pack, you can do that.
Before I move on, any other input from the other folks before I go on? I think that's a pretty comprehensive answer, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah, cool. That's good. So I think this question is pressing for a lot of people because EVs are still, I think, felt like a new thing, but how many, or are there many independent garages who can repair an EV? So I think it's taken for granted that if you've got a petrol or diesel, you can go anywhere with your car. I don't think people feel like they're quite as comfortable being able to do that with an EV.
I think, and Phil can certainly talk to this, but I mean, I guess there's this lag between EVs being sold and then the aftermarket repairers catching up, and I would guess that most people who are currently, their businesses servicing independently cars are invest in all the skills and equipment that they need until they see a real surge in ownership levels. So Phil certainly does some repairs, and I'm sure he can speak to that. I mean, normally I still recommend people go to the manufacturers, but obviously there's a cost associated to that. But I think there's probably a few years yet before we see the sort of aftermarket servicing industry catch up. But I'm interested to know what the other guys have to say on that.
Yeah, I see in the UK you have all the EVelectricvehicles garages, which are the hybrid electric vehicle, and those guys are pretty well in tune. They've all the right equipment, all the right safety gear. I've played around with a few EVs myself in my own time, more of a hobby. And I just try, I've been doing maintenance, I do stuff that I'm only qualified to do, brakes, suspension, stuff like that. But there are guys, if you're going to do it, you need the equipment, you need the safety gear, it's high voltage. And you need to, there are guys and garages that are advertising that you have hybrid and electric vehicle technicians. But what I see is also possibly coming in is even anyone involved with EVs or electric cars will have to have some kind of qualification, validating, small maintenance, just how to get around and what an EV is and what the high risk parts are. I believe it's in the UK at the moment, and you might see that coming into Ireland.
I think there's sorry Simon, just to say there is a rule of thumb here that a nice car would have over 2,000 moving parts, whereas an EV has maybe about 20. So it's moving parts that break. So there's just that general thing that there's much less to break in an EV. So then the interesting thing with the Vectrix bikes that we were getting repaired, lots of motorcycle repair places were afraid to touch the motorbike because it was electric. But it turned out that, you know, replacing the brakes and the suspension is the same for an electric as for a thing. So you need just you know, a certain level of training and cop on by the car maintenance people that says, right, there is this issue with high voltage, but that's very limited. It's mostly suspension issues or body issues that need to be repaired in a car, because the engine is highly unlikely to break.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, I'll wrap up my Miriam O'Callaghan impression and I'll pass back to Simon to wrap up. But thank you all.
Thank you, Kevin. Kind of threw you on the bus there, but appreciate you picking up from Peter. Well, we're a bit over. We're a quarter of an hour over, but as I said, I think it's good to give everyone the chance to speak and to fulfill the agenda that we have. Thanks everyone for taking the time on a Saturday afternoon to engage on this. Thanks to all the speakers, fantastic job. So yeah, and as well, give us some feedback. You email me, chair@irishevowners.ie with any feedback you've got. We'll take anything on board from today that, you know, we can put into doing next time, any topics you'd like covered and so on for the next one. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks a lot, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Take care.